Well, hello again, everybody. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Delta Leaf Labs. Did you know that you can find out the sex of your plant 4 times faster when you use the plant DNA sex testing kit from Delta Leaf Labs? Which means that you're saving money, because the sooner you know what you're working with, the sooner you can make a decision on what you're going to do. So go over to deltaleaflabs.com. Order your plant DNA sex testing kit today. And at checkout, use promo code IMGS10 to get 10% off of that order. And also, don't forget, 101cbd.org wants to invite you to the Raw CBD Festival. That's happening Saturday, June 29th, 2019 at Pier Shoals Beach in Ventura from noon to 5 p.m. Now, they'd like you to come out and share a day of fun, raw CBD, hemp shakes, music, laughter, waves, food, and refreshments to celebrate the raw CBD movement. Now get this, dogs are going to be the featured guest at this thing, because 101 CBD is going to be giving out free samples of bacon CBD. I'm not sure if it's the bacon CBD oil or actual bacon bits, but one or the other, they're going to have them there for your dog in preparation for the 4th of July, because, you know, a lot of dogs don't do really well with the fireworks. So hopefully the CBD will help kind of calm them a little bit. So don't forget, Saturday, June 29th from noon to 5 at Pier Shoals Beach in Ventura. All right. Now let's get started. Well, welcome back, everybody. This is the In My Grow Show, the podcast dedicated to taking the mystery out of cannabis. I'm your host, Alex, and I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. This is episode number 66. And I want to take this moment, since it is Father's Day, to say Happy Father's Day to my dad, Pops. Thank you very much for everything. Love you to death, man. I saw a funny meme yesterday. It said, on Mother's Day, all the restaurants are booked, but on Father's Day, they want us to barbecue. Something like that. It was funnier when I read it. A little later, I'm going to play a conversation that I had with my buddy Rodney. He's back from Colombia. We're going to talk a bit about how that went for him, but that's going to be later. Right now, let's get to the strain of the week. And surprise, I don't have a strain to review this week. Instead, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the actual word sativa. So sativa in like the botanical world just means cultivated. Well, here's the definition that I got off of Wikipedia. It says sativa, sativus, sativum are Latin botanical adjectives meaning cultivated, used to designate certain seed-grown domestic crops. Sativa ending in A is the feminine form of the adjective, sativus is the masculine, and sativum is the neutral. Now here are some of the Latin names of some well-known domestic crops. I apologize if I mess up any of the names. It is in Latin. I did not take Latin. I'm doing the best I can. All I have to work with is Spanish. Alright, so Allium sativum is garlic, Avena sativa is common oats, Maricago sativa is alfalfa, and Rhiza sativa is rice. So as I was saying, the word sativa in botanical speak just means cultivated, just means that it has to have human hands in order to grow the way we want it. And sometimes when I'm looking up strains or doing some research on strains, I come across the label Cannabis sativa L. And we can thank the father of modern taxonomy, Swedish botanist Carolus Linnaeus, because in 1753 he came up with or invented a different system of classifying plants, and he published it in his Systema Naturae. I guess that's a book he wrote. And he basically categorized all the cannabis that he studied as Cannabis sativa. And since his name is Linnaeus, that's why it has that capital L behind that. It says Cannabis sativa L. Now, since he did use the word sativa as being cultivated, like cannabis that's been cultivated, I'm assuming a lot of the stuff that he studied was the hemp variety. I couldn't really find anywhere where it said that he studied any kind of drug variety of cannabis. I don't know how available it was in Sweden in 1753, so I'm assuming a lot of the stuff he studied was hemp. But given that hemp and cannabis can be crossed and bred together, they kind of group it all together scientifically to make it easier. And it wasn't until about 1974 when botanist Lorraine Anderson and Richard Schultz started studying the drug varieties of cannabis. That's when we started to get these labels or species or subspecies of cannabis of sativa, indica, and ruderalis. Anderson and Schultz seem to categorize the different types of plants by how they grew, by their structure. The sativa strain is a much taller plant, a lankier plant. The internal spacings between branches and leaves is bigger, whereas the indica, it's a much shorter, much squattier plant than the sativa. It's more bushier, basically. The leaf structure is different. Then they went ahead and categorized the ruderalis strain of cannabis, which is an even smaller plant than the indica, a little more scrawny, which is also why sometimes when I'm looking up strain information, I'll see the description of Cannabis sativa L sativa or Cannabis sativa L indica, which is basically just saying cultivated cannabis of the indica variety or cultivated cannabis of the sativa variety. So that's what that means. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Like I said, I didn't have a strain of the week, so I decided to give a little, history lesson as best I could. Alright, moving on. I want to give a quick reminder for anybody who's local in the 805 in California, if you're in Ventura, Oxnard, Santa Paula, Santa Barbara, remember that Happy Tree Art class is having their next Puff and Paint on Sunday, June 23rd. Now, this is a lot of fun. Like I said, if you're in the 805, you should really think about going. It is an art class that is 420 friendly. You can smoke pot, and it's a great deal. Because for $20, you get a pre-rolled joint, an edible, and an art lesson, with all the art supplies included. You can't beat that, man. I went last month and I had a great time. This month they're going to have an artist by the name of Violet, and you can find her on Instagram at Bioket or Bioket. That is Bioket. So if you're interested, go over to Instagram and find Happy Tree Art Class 805. You can get all the details there and you can RSVP your spot. More than likely you're going to see me there. Also about this Puff and Paint, they're also going to have a food vendor selling some delicious grub. It is Sian Khan Mayan cuisine. It's put together by my buddy Juan. I've had his food. I've had it there. It's delicious, man. So pay your $20 to go to this Puff and Paint, and then bring some extra cash to buy some food because it's going to be awesome. Now let's do the report from the cannabis front line. I want to read a little bit from an article that I found in Barron's, and it's titled, "He was a decorated Army veteran. He took a marijuana job. Now he can't get his pension." And this was written by Brett Ahrens. And it's telling the story of how U.S. Army Major Ty Reedy, he went to West Point just before September 11th and ended up in active duty for 11 years. He served 2 combat tours in Iraq and another one in Afghanistan. He led units in the so-called surge campaigns in both wars. And he was awarded 4 Bronze Stars. But none of that mattered because the U.S. Army stripped him of his pension. And that's because after retiring from active duty, the father of 2 went on to work in the cannabis industry. Now, Reedy is the Director of Operations Services at Acreage Holding, which invests in a lot of different cannabis ventures in a lot of different states, even in Canada. And in case you didn't know, Acreage Holdings, on their board of advisors, is John Boehner, the ex-Speaker of the House. But none of that mattered to the Judge Advocate General's office at West Point, which is the JAG office, because it wrote to him, "A military officer working in the cannabis industry runs contrary to Army values." Now, technically, West Point merely stripped Reedy of his position as a part-time military academy liaison officer, a role which involves working with civilians such as potential recruits. In practice, this denies him the ability to complete the needed 20 years of service to get his pension. Now, to me, that seems really fucked up, because here we have this decorated soldier, did 3 tours of active duty in the military, in war zones, comes back, wants to stay in the Army, enough just to get his pension, come on, man, he put in his time, but he also needs to make a little more money to pay his rent, so he goes to work for Acreage Holding. And I'm pretty sure that the Director of Operations, which is what Reedy's title is, I don't think he's dealing with handling cannabis. I don't think he's out there rolling joints for Acreage Holding. It just seems ridiculous. And it really gets me though, it also seems hypocritical. The U.S. government itself holds patents for cannabis. Come on, man. How are you going to throw away this guy's military career over something that the government itself is involved in? That's bullshit. There's a link in the show notes so you can read the whole article, man. But hopefully this is just one of the things that changes when cannabis goes federally legal. And I say that very optimistically. I really do believe cannabis is going to go legal, let's say in the next 5 years federally in this country. Alright, now the next thing I want to talk about is another article I read, and I found this over at npr.org. And the title of it is called "Possessing Marijuana in Prison is Not a Felony, California Courts Say." And this was put together by Bill Chappell. And it starts off saying, "California prison inmates who possess small amounts of marijuana are not guilty of a felony crime, according to an appeals court which reasoned that because it's legal to have some amount of pot in the state, The same is true inside the prisons, but the justices also said it's still illegal to smoke or ingest cannabis in prison. That right there seems like two conflicting ideas, but let's read on. It says, the plain language of Proposition 64 is clear, the panel of 3 justices said, referring to the 2016 initiative legalizing recreational marijuana use. They concluded that possession of less than 1 ounce of cannabis in prison or similar penal institutions is not a felony. In response to the ruling, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitations emphasized that inmates are still banned from smoking or ingesting marijuana in its prisons. While the court's decision is still under review, we want to be clear that drug use and sales within state prison remains prohibited, said the CDCR press secretary, and that is the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitations. Secretary Vicki Waters, she added that the agency will evaluate the decision with an eye towards maintaining health and security within the institutions. The mixed decision was met with confusion among both prosecutors and criminal defense attorneys, even as some acknowledged that it is a step towards adjusting criminal law to reflect recreational marijuana's legal status in California. Now, when I first read this, I kind of had to scratch my head because I think possession in prison should be treated the way alcohol possession in prison is treated. You get the same amount of time added for it, because it's still considered contraband. So in my mind, that's the easiest fix, is, to just treat it like they got caught with alcohol. That's what I think about that. And remember that, everybody, if you're living in a state where you're about to get legal cannabis, recreational or medical, these are just some of the things you're going to have to talk about. I would have never thought about this. But, apparently this subject does come up. So we all just need to stay involved in this whole conversation about legalizing cannabis. Now, the last thing in the report is a headline that I saw, and it reads, the USDA legalized THC, but no one noticed. And this was put together by Deborah Borchert over at Real Money. And what it's basically talking about is that the USDA, since it had to redefine hemp for the Farm Bill of 2018, it descheduled THC that's derived or comes from hemp. It took it off of the Controlled Substance Act. And if you go to the show notes, I'll put a link up about the USDA's comments and legal opinions. Now, when you go to the report, go to page 5. It's the section 1261.9 that talks about the Controlled Substance Act and THC. All right, let me read a little bit of this. It says Section 1261.9 amends the CSA, the Controlled Substance Act, to exclude hemp from the CSA definition of marijuana. Section 1261.9 also amends the CSA to exclude THC hemp from the Schedule 1. A little further down it reads the 2018 Farm Bill amends the CSA to exclude THC in hemp in Schedule 1, as amended by the 2018 Farm Bill. In other words, hemp is no longer a controlled substance. Also, by amending Schedule 1 to exclude THC in hemp, Congress has likewise removed THC in hemp from the Controlled Substance Act. So how I understand it is that the USDA took THC that's derived from hemp off of the Controlled Substance Act, so therefore it's no longer a Schedule 1 drug. Which is going to be fascinating to see how that works out, because in my mind, if cannabis doesn't go legal, like the recreational drug form of cannabis doesn't go legal, people are just going to start breeding hemp to have more THC, which is just going to turn it into, again, the drug form of cannabis. But since it's derived from hemp, it's legal. Now, one thing I found out when I was looking this stuff up is that at one time there was a study done to determine at which point people got high when they took cannabis. And in the study it showed that 0.3 was the mid-range. I don't know how they can say that 0.3 was the mid-range, but there you go. Now, some people needed less to get high, but most people didn't start to feel the effects until they had more than 0.3 THC. So the scientists said, okay, so we're just going to put it at 0.3 and just left it there. And there hasn't really been any new research to really change that. Now, there's a link in the show note to the USDA legal opinion. Read it, check it out, let me know what you think, because, how I'm reading it, the USDA has just basically said THC is no longer, if it comes from hemp, but how are you going to prove that? Come on, how are you going to prove that? The THC is no longer a Schedule 1, as it should be. But take a look at the report and get back to me. Shoot me an email, inmygrow@gmail.com, or find me on Instagram @inmygrow, even easier. And that is it for the report from the Cannabis Frontline today. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is essential oils for our pets. Because I got quite a few questions this week about if people can use their CBD tinctures that they get and give them to their pets. And the first thing I tell people mostly when they ask me that is you have to be really careful because the tinctures that we get have essential oils in them for flavoring because, hemp oil, CBD oil tastes like shit naturally. I mean, without any flavor, it tastes like crap. So we add essential oils for flavoring. But some of those essential oils don't do well with our pets. Our pets don't handle them very well. Different ones will affect dogs, different ones will affect cats. Now, before I go any further, I need to remind you all, I am not a veterinarian of any kind. I'm not a doctor of any kind. I'm not a lawyer of any kind. I'm not even a plumber. Okay, so remember that. You have to be your own advocate. You have to do your own research when it comes to your health and also the health of your pet. And always talk to your vet. Talk to your veterinarian before you give your dog or your cat or your bird something, that's holistic and natural. I'm not saying that those things are bad, but we shouldn't just rely on the internet. Now, I did look up a few of the oils that will harm our pets, and I'm planning to invite Dr. Eileen Gillen back on the show so we can talk about this topic, since it has come up so much. And she also told me that she'd get a list together and send that out to me, so as soon as I get it, I'll put that up on the website, inmygrow.com, and just share it with everyone. Okay, so here's a short list of what I found the essential oils that'll mess with our pets. Let's start with dogs. The ones you shouldn't give dogs is clove oil, garlic oil, juniper, rosemary, tea tree, thyme, and wintergreen. And the ones that cats don't do well with is cassia, cinnamon, citrus, clove, eucalyptus, lemon, lavender, peppermint, spruce, tea tree, and thyme also. Once again, this is just a short list. I saw a much bigger list that I think the Kennel Club put out. So as I was saying, just do your homework and talk to your vet. Now I'm going to take a short break, and when I come back, I'm going to have a conversation that I recorded with my buddy Rodney, who just got back from Colombia, talking about how cannabis is seen in Colombia. Hang tight and I'll play that for you. Well, everyone, as promised, back on the show, we've got my buddy, Rodney Medina. Rodney, brother, welcome back, man.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here. I know it's always fun to talk cannabis and the like with you.
Well, thanks, man. No, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me because I know you've been really busy lately. Mostly, when I say really busy, so one of the things is you're no longer with Green Flower Media.
No, I'm not. I was with Green Flower in my introduction into the cannabis industry, coming from television and spending 3 good years there, learning all about the industry, about the plant specifically, and everybody who I could learn from as far as educating myself on the plant and activism and not only here in the United States, but, in Latin American countries and little bits of Europe as well. So I decided that I wanted to continue to produce content that was educational in nature, but I wanted to expand into creating content that was in Spanish because there was a greater need out there that I felt in those countries as far as educating the populace and potential patients on the plant. And so I decided to move on and tackle that endeavor.
Far out, man. No, that sounds awesome. I love the whole fact that you're really driven into creating more content in Spanish. Good on you, brother. Yeah, that's going to be awesome. I can't wait. Now, with that in mind, you just got back from a Mexican South American tour.
Well, yes, I did a brief stop in Mexico City and helped out a friend of mine who runs a show down there called Encuentro Canábico, and it was a quick weekend where I went and helped him develop some of the media for that particular show. And I may have mentioned him on a previous interview. And he runs Cáñamo magazine down there, and
oh yeah, so no, that's a great magazine, man. They got a lot of really good content.
With Julio,
yeah,
and so I went down there, but then the movement took me down into Colombia, specifically Bogota. I've been down to Colombia before, but had never been to Bogota. And I went down and was part of the media team that produced all of the content for a show put on by Carol Ortega from the Muisca group. The show is called Gana Ciencia, and it's a health and science symposium that featured doctors, researchers, scientists from really all around the world. And it was an incredible event. There was information there that really isn't discussed or presented too much here in the United States, because a lot of those doctors down there and scientists and researchers, they're working with the plant, they're doing research, they're working with patients, they're taking their talents to clinics, they're working with nonprofit organizations to get medicine to patients who need it. So a lot of their stories are not secondhand or thirdhand, they're firsthand. So it really is exciting to be part of that education that these doctors, scientists, and researchers present to the attendees of the symposium. So that's what I was doing down in Bogota. I was there for a couple of weeks preparing for the event itself. I had to put a crew together to record the content, and we had a press conference room where we interviewed each of the presenters after their presentation. And it was an incredible event. You know, I got to know a lot more people, like what is so important in this industry, in the media, content creators, people such as myself, media persons who are dedicated to the plant and the education that is required to make more fans and more patients of cannabis.
Wow, so they're doing a lot of the human study work down in South America and in Colombia?
They're just working with more patients that I know of compared to the United States. Now, maybe it's because I've been spending more time down there and I'm a little more intimate with a lot of these doctors and scientists and I'm privy to their presentations. But it seems that they are working with the plant on a more regular basis, with regards to specific health ailments that we only talk about here. We talk about how cannabis can be good for our veterans and PTSD, but most of the talk is about let the veterans get their medicine. They're not getting the medicine that they need. Well, there are many forms of PTSD. There's trauma from abuse, whether it's family abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, domestic abuse, that kind of thing, which is just as bad of a PTSD than any other kind, and it can be treated with cannabis. So these are doctors and who are working with patients through nonprofits or even in their own clinics that they have set up, where they can work with these patients. So it's really exciting to hear straight from them the results they're getting. And not only just the results, but they know the science behind how cannabis is helping these patients.
Hey, so when you were down there, did you get a feeling of how, like, the kind of pushback that the medical community is getting or the cannabis community is getting just from people at large that don't understand or just don't see it as medicine? They just see it as how you're being a drogadicto marihuano? Or
I really don't, because I'm not. I'm kind of in a bubble when I go down there. I'm around cannabis people, so I don't really get to hear or feel or see what the general population is. What they feel. Although I know the stigma is very heavy. I mean, there was a part of while I was down there, another couple things that happened while I was down there. There's an activist here who many United States cannabis people know about, named Steve D'Angelo. And he was down there at the time, and I knew he was going to be there, and I actually introduced him to a few of my contacts down there, which really opened the doors for his ability to go and explore various areas of Colombia and see what was going on, not only in the medical and science field, but with the indigenous folks too. And he was really excited about some of those things that he was able to do because of those contacts that we were able to secure for him. He went. We also had him at a at a march in Medellin, which was a marcha canábico, and there were over 150,000 people on the streets of Medellin marching in support of cannabis. And through one of my connections there, an attorney in Medellin, I was able to get Steve to the organizers of the event. Steve not only walked or marched arm in arm with these activists, but he also had an opportunity to speak to the 150,000 people. It was a really incredible and emotional moment for him, and even for me too, to see how just a simple introduction years ago with that attorney was able to lead to Steve D'Angelo being able to have that emotional moment. Steve's a very emotional guy. If anybody, if any of you know him, please look him up. I think you can go to stevendangelo.com or stevedangelo.com and see his work. So it was really incredible to be a part of that. And that march was right around a very large Catholic church, and it's the church that carries a lot of that stigma against cannabis as well down in those South American, those Latin countries. So it was quite the scene to see 100,000 people demonstrating in favor of this incredible plant right outside the church. So do you see it? Do you feel it? You know it's there. You know it's there because the stigma is very heavy. Now remember, in South America specifically, or Colombia, many people have died because of this, not cannabis specifically, but just because of drugs, cocaine and the cartels and the wars and this and that and the other. So with that having happened, cannabis has that stigma as well because it's a quote unquote drug. So it's going to be quite a long haul in converting that stigma or getting rid of that stigma in South America. But the presence of somebody like Steve D'Angelo down there will hopefully help change that because it'll draw attention to it from people outside the country. And really, I think that's what it's going to take. People coming in from outside the country to demonstrate to the Colombianos that, hey, this plant is here. It can help you. It can help people. It can help the health of people. And in some cases for Colombia, it has been a peace instigator. It was through cannabis that they were able to negotiate peace between the government and the anti-government forces. So cannabis does have a future there, and we're glad to be a part of it.
That's interesting what you just brought up about the Catholic Church, and I hadn't really thought about it that heavily. So that makes me wonder, has the conversation of cannabis yet evolved in Colombia like it has in the United States as far as now a lot of people talk about it as cannabis and CBD. They're two different avenues of conversation. And
definitely. I spoke about that bubble that I'm in. Everything that I go to in Mexico and South America, everything is geared towards health and science. So there really isn't anything that any of the conferences that I attend that talk or promote adult use just for what many seem to say recreational use, which is a term we don't like to use. But adult use cannabis.
I'm starting to hear that
those people are going to use cannabis for their own personal reasons, whether they feel it's going to have medicinal benefits or not. They want to get high. That's cool.
I'm starting to hear
we don't
term.
Really touch on those fans. We're focused on health and science. The conversation is vibrant there. I also went to another show in Cartagena. In Colombia, which was Expo Cannabis. It was a business conference put on by Julian Tovar, another great conference in a great location. One of the keynote speakers was former Mexican President Vicente Fox. Also, Jim Belushi was one of the presenters down there. So he as well was caught up in the fervor, and I worked with Jim while he was down there as well on his reality show. I put a crew together to shoot his reality show episode that is going to air on his on A&E network. He put together an episode where he's going to look for the famed Santa Marta gold seeds. And look, man, he put this concept together. I'm going to look for the Santa Marta gold seeds. But what he didn't know was that some of my contacts were able to actually get him the Santa Marta gold seeds. So I don't know what's going to happen on the reality show. If he's going to tell you that he did get them or not. But
does he act surprised at the end?
Man.
Does he act surprised at the end?
I think he was surprised at the fact that I told him early on, hey, I can get you those seeds. He's like, what? I go, yeah, I know a guy who can bring you those seeds. And so I called the guy. He was about 40 minutes away. And the guy came down, and he didn't have the seeds with him, but he actually became part of the story. Condor Mejia. And he became a huge part of the Jim's reality show. So Condor, if you're listening, man, remember who your agent was, bro. But so it was really neat, man. It was really neat because Condor's a good guy. He's very in tune with not only cannabis, but just the indigenous people, how they go about in their lives, and plants and soil and the spiritual connection of not only cannabis but other I guess you could call them mind altering substances. And but Condor was a good sport about it, and he appeared in Jim Belushi's show, and so we'll look forward to that on A&E coming in the fall. But that was another thing, with Cartagena. But the Expo Cannabis really showed me, like, we also, it was Vicente Fox, it was Jim Belushi, and there was also ex-senator of Colombia, Juan Manuel Galan. And Juan Manuel Galan is a very famous activist. In fact, his father was a presidential candidate for Colombia at one time, and he was assassinated by Pablo Escobar's group, and unfortunately, and he was basically, I don't know, kind of a equivalent to our Kennedy. The country wept when he was assassinated. And now Juan Manuel Galan, his son, is now a cannabis activist. And he was saying, look, we are poised, Colombia is, and Vicente Fox said the same thing. We are poised to be the world leader in cannabis production, or cultivation, production, and exports. And it was really a rallying cry to everybody who attended that conference to see Colombia as that. And they have the potential. They're already growing hectares and hectares of cannabis everywhere. So it's just a matter of putting in the right people in the right places, I suppose, and getting the country behind it. But they are really poised to take over the world with regards to cannabis, just the cannabis movement.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because I remember the last time you were on, we were talking about that same thing as far as the cut flower industry. And I spoke about it a couple of weeks ago also on the show, was that the cut flower industry, for a reason, doesn't exist anymore in the United States.
Right.
Maybe there's a few holdouts of tulips and orchids, but roses, that's all grown in South America. That's all grown in Colombia. Sure, because they do have that equatorial, that nice weather on the equator, because, for a lot of these reasons. And, I was reading an article, and it said that Colombia right now can produce a gram of cannabis for like 50 cents. Whereas any other player, they're looking at maybe $2 to $6 per gram of cannabis.
Right. And that, for a cannabis consumer, that is great. But for, there's always a loser in the story like that. And in this case, the losers are the indigenous growers. Many of the people are not getting, those growers, those cultivators, remember, many of them were growing coca leaves, the coca plant, to provide that industry with what they needed to do their thing. And many of them, in fact, coca leaves are still being grown at a higher rate right now than ever before. Even after the war on drugs and that's another story. So, but the cannabis cultivators are not getting the prices that they would like or that they even deserve. In fact, many of the growers, this is a story that repeated itself many times in some of these regions like Cauca and Santa Marta, which are very heavily populated with cultivation operations. They're women. They're ran by women, the women of the family, the mothers, because the men have to go out and either they're the ones selling the cannabis or they're out working a regular job to help supplement the money that they're not receiving from their cannabis. So it's, is it a matter of they're not growing the best quality cannabis? It could be. Is it a matter of that they don't have the right representation? It could be. Are there other forces that are preventing that? Is it because there are American companies now and Canadian companies out there negotiating deals that are more in their favor as opposed to the indigenous people? Could be. I mean, those are all the questions that we have to ask, and hopefully we can find the answers to, because you really start to understand and feel and for the plight of these indigenous growers. It's when I came back, all I felt was that I wanted to bring more education to them, more product knowledge. How can they grow a better product so they can demand a higher price, so that they can be paid that quote unquote living wage for themselves and their families. You don't want to hear that people in this chain of business, that there's somebody who's losing. And in this case, many of those indigenous growers are the ones losing. It doesn't matter where it is, Cauca, Santa Marta, or wherever. It's happening. So, and they're well aware of it. There are individuals there who are trying to work to organize the growers, and educate them, and just so they can stand up for themselves, very soon, and definitely in the future, so that they can command that higher rate for cannabis, because without that representation, they're just going to continue to lose on that end, and they shouldn't. I mean, as we know, cannabis is a high paying. The profit margins are huge when you're in the right area, when you're in the right place, and everybody should win. And so there's no reason why the cultivators shouldn't have a shot at it. And what better place than California, where experts and cultivators and scientists, or even people who develop technology, than California, to be able to go down there and work with the indigenous people to bring the technologies down there and make it affordable for them to be able to incorporate it into their grows, so that they can develop a better product, or even develop more products. Why not teach them how to do cold pressed hash? Why not teach them how to extract oil and develop some extraction facilities that are owned by the indigenous people, so that they can reap some of the benefits? I mean, we talk about social equity here in California and around the United States, about letting minorities be a part of this business. It's needed everywhere. It really is needed everywhere. So it's, cannabis, we're a self-regulating industry. We have to be good to our own people. It's a plant that's supposed to encourage that. So we have to follow it all the way through and make sure that people like that are represented and taken care of.
Hey, so is cannabis legal in Colombia?
It is legal. It's funny, you can grow it, you can process it, you can, do the manufacturing of products. But there are there's no dispensaries. There are no dispensaries.
Really?
So, it's hitting the gray market, the black market in cases, and being exported too. The oils and things, and those licensed facilities. Remember, a lot of these places are just getting licensed right now, so they're just really revving up the engines as far as the processing and extraction and exporting. So at some point soon, they're going to have to address the fact that people need to be able to buy it in a store. There are smoke shops, but they're not openly selling cannabis products in there. So, that's something I really don't know too much about yet, as far as how soon they're going to incorporate that. But, it's just like Mexico. I was just talking to a friend today from Colorado, and we were talking about Mexico, and she was saying, yeah, Mexico's the same way. And you can carry, I think she said 5 or 10 grams around, 5 grams around with you in Mexico, but you can't grow it. So you're just supposed to get it from the cannabis fairy or a unicorn, or where's it supposed to come from? You can have it, but you can't buy it, and you can't grow it. but you can have it.
But that's supposed to change though here in a little bit in Mexico because I know
this year.
Yeah, well, because I know
by the end of this year they're going.
I think they were talking about. Well, okay, from what I read, they were supposed to have something hashed out by the end of August.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, and I think that may be pushed. In fact, one of the shows that I attend there called Cannabis Salud, it usually is in June, and they postponed it until October 31st and to November 1st in hopes that will have been hammered out so they can be more excited about something and they can promote new laws and open up new businesses for not only companies in Mexico, but for companies in the United States to start working in Mexico.
So down in Colombia, there are no actual stores. Is that by design? They don't allow. Do you know if they just don't allow people to open a dispensary?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I know of quote unquote head shops down there. I know a friend of mine actually owns a couple of them down there, and there are large chains of them. I would have to guess that they're probably distributing some products with THC in them, but they're so under the counter about it that it's not anything that they advertise. But
sure,
I can't. I'm not really too sure about that.
Right.
I'd be happy to check into it, but if it's probably it's probably advertising they don't want right now. So. Until something is hammered out. I do know they have the head shops, where you can go and you can buy nutrients, you can buy pipes, you can buy bongs, you can buy even vape apparatus. So, I mean, come on. Where else are you going to go if you're looking for cannabis products? I mean, I'm sure if they don't sell it in the store, they know where to get it.
And once you fix that issue, it goes a long way to addressing what you were talking about as far as the small farmer, let's call him the craft farmer, having somewhere to put his product. At least that's some kind of thing they can do. But
yeah, and that is, it really starts to flesh out what I mean, because if they're coming, if they're able to create their own
their brand, their
exactly,
own following,
those cultivators, those growers, like we do here in California.
Yeah.
Then they now at least can process their flower. The Muisca group, Carol's group, she was telling me at one time she was she had set up little workshops for the cultivators just to show them how to trim their bud because they weren't doing it. So, what's going to improve the value of your bud more than making it look pretty?
Yeah, bag appeal.
Yeah, and that was a simple thing that she was able to show some of these growers on how to do. And she knew how to do it herself. She's an executive of a company, but she knows how to trim. She actually learned how to trim with Paul Stanford up in Oregon, who's had his own operation going on up there. And she took a job trimming just so that she could know how to do it. Now, that's a true CEO right there, man. When you want to learn how to do that and have learned how to do it, I give her a lot of credit.
Hey, teach someone how to fish, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And you have to understand, that's how the plant is, man. Full education involves knowing everything about the plant, how it's cultivated, how it's processed, what things can be made of it, what the health benefits are of it, and the well-intentioned people who are in this business are going to know all of that. If you're just in the business to make a quick buck, yeah, you can do it. You can get your vape pens out and not know where the hell your flower comes from and do your thing and brand it and be a marketing guru. That's cool, I guess. But if you're really in it to help people, you really have to understand more of the plant. And that's not something that I would have even known 3 or 4 years ago because I didn't know anything. I didn't know as much then as I do now about it. But and I still really feel like I don't know everything. There's a lot I don't know, but what I do know is that I have a deep, deep appreciation for the plant and for people who are well-intentioned and do have that knowledge about it. So I really do appreciate that.
Right on, brother. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. So what's next for you, Rodney?
I really like the indigenous women cultivator story, and I would like to go down there and develop those stories, create some content that will that's a win-win. I'm not about going down there and just telling their story and coming back and saying, look, see what's going on and explain. I don't want to be part of that exploitation system. I want to bring something to them. So if I can bring some education to them and they can win and grow and be better at what they do and prosper a little bit, I'd love to be able to tell that story and give credit to whoever goes down there and helps them with that, with that education. There's one particular story though, Alex, that came to me while I was there in Bogota. It was from a gentleman named Jeff Frazier, and he's an attorney for the Hoban Law Group, who's out of Colorado. And he has a history in Colombia. He sued the United States DEA and the government of Colombia for their, I think it was you heard the Plan Colombia, when they were eradicating all the coca fields and trying to, as part of the quote unquote war on drugs. But they caught on to what was really going on, that when you overlaid the map of where they were killing the coca leaves or the coca plants and where the country's natural oil reserves were, they just happened to be in those very same areas. So he sued the DEA and the Colombian government and seized those operations from happening because they realized that we were being had. Not only they, but we were being had, and we were part of that. Yeah, so that was his history there. But he brought to me this story. It was called the Maldición de Yarumal. And Yarumal is a valley there next to Medellin, where there's the highest rate of early onset dementia and Alzheimer's in the population there and in the world. More people are getting that disease in that area than anywhere in the world. And they traced it back to the genetics of a Spanish conquistador who was there in the region at the time. And so genetically, he basically infected this population with the gene that causes dementia and Alzheimer's. And these are people who are getting dementia at 45 years old and dying within 10 years.
Wow.
And that's relatively young if you know anybody who has that.
Yeah, no, that's
usually something that, it's a very horrible disease, but it happens to people who are in their 80s or 70s or 90s or whatever. But this is happening to people at 40 years old, 45 years old. So what they're trying to do, what Jeff was part of, was this project where they're getting the government to sponsor a project where they're going to try to use cannabis to try and reverse the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's, to try to come up with that strain that will help these people. Now, another component of this project is that there are a lot of coca leaves being grown there, or coca plants. I always say leaves, but plants that are being grown there. So they're going to remove the coca plants, and because they've been processing the coca leaves into cocaine for so many decades, the earth is poisoned with chemicals and things that are just really bad, not only for the earth, but for anybody who's there. But they're going to plant hemp in its place. And as you know, anybody in the cannabis industry knows that hemp is a bioaccumulator. It's going to clean the earth and actually make it great again for cannabis growth and anything else that they want to grow.
Wow.
There. So that's part of that project as well. Now, Big Pharma has already tried to go down there and address the issue of the dementia and the Alzheimer's. And they put together a program. I don't even know the name of the company, but there's articles on the web you can find. And I will send you that link, that tell how this company went down there. They had their own, formulation of something that they created, and they were going to do a study, and the results are not going to be available till 2021. Well, it came out, I think it was early this year, that they've already abandoned the project because the results were not even near what they were expecting. So not only did they go in there and try, they've already failed and gave up. So cannabis now is going to step in and hopefully imagine what could happen if cannabis were to make an impact on that horrible disease. So that's a project that I want to be a part of. I'd love to get a documentary produced on to follow and track this project. The project is fully funded by the government and a government of Colombia. So now we're working to see how we can get a documentary funded so that we can tell the story, because it truly could change the course of that specific disease. And that would be incredible.
Wow, man, that sounds like a great project, man. That's
yeah, it is.
Yeah,
and, it's one of many.
That'd be an interesting
really
story to hear. What kind of difference it made, or even what we learned.
Yeah, it is what we could learn from that. They did learn a little bit when the big pharma company went down there. They did learn a little bit about the plaque that builds up in the brain, and I mean something that we already knew, but they came away with a little bit more knowledge, but it wasn't as effective as they were hoping it would be. So they abandoned the project. So let's just hope that cannabis, with its purpose and promise, that it can actually do something. And actually, one of the guys who did the study, who kind of compiled a lot of the information, not about Big Pharma project, but about that genetic lineage that they found and the population. He's a professor at UCSB. So how crazy is that? Out of every places in the world, the guy I can go to and talk about this
What's his name?
Is a half hour away.
What's his name?
I don't know. His name escapes me, but if you hold on a second, I can pull it up here. Yeah.
Come on, Rodney. If you're going to be dropping names, dude, at least have it right there.
I already dropped a few. Yeah, new scientist. Okay, here it is.
All right.
Now, the gentleman's name is Ken Cossack, and he's at UCSB. And, they were part of the group that was getting blood samples and doing, they brought some of the patients up to Arizona, I believe, and did some scans of their brain. And so he knows quite a bit of what was going on down there. They call the disease la bóveda, or the foolishness. And, it's really sad because a lot of these people, they were forced with an ethical decision, the doctors and research and scientists down there. They could test somebody and find out if they had that genetic makeup to determine if they had it. But the question was, should they tell them if they did? Because they didn't want the people to know, because many of them were willing to take their own life to escape it. And that was straight quotes. One guy had said, he goes, there's no cure for this. Why would you want to know? He goes, I want to know because I want to, and he put his finger to his head like he was just going to kill himself. And, these are people who if you have that genetic makeup, you're 50-50 chance that you're going to get it. And it's people so they don't want to know. I mean, either they do or they don't. And some adults and people are not having kids because they know that they're carrying that gene, and they don't want to curse. They don't want to curse their lineage of family.
Wow.
That's why they call it the maldición de Yarumal. It's the
curse
of Yarumal.
Hey, so did you say the government's already paying for the program as far as they're going to clean it up with hemp and then plant cannabis and try that?
Yes, they did. They did. They are going to fund that particular project. In fact, when I met Jeff down there, he was telling me we met at where the conference was in Bogota, and he says, "Yeah, we just have a few more things to button up. One thing in particular." And I said, "What is that?" He goes, "Well, the people who process the coca leaves into cocaine, they're going to be out of work because we're going to plant cannabis and we're going to plant cáñamo, hemp." And only because I know, I mean, I'm sure he did too, but I just said, well, why don't you just give them the extraction business? Have them set up their extraction facilities, and now they're still in control of the most important part of this process. And he said, shit, you're right. He goes, you know what? That's what we need to do. So he had a Monday, following Monday, he had a meeting with the governor of Antioquia. It's the department it's like our state, Antioquia. That's it. He had a meeting with the governor of the state of Antioquia, and I guess they wrapped it up because he texted me on Tuesday morning following and said, "Hey, the deal is fully funded. We're ready to go." So I'm looking forward to it. They're doing an analysis from June 10th to June 21st, which is next week. They're going to go down and kind of map out what the project's going to be. And hopefully from that, I'll be able to develop a treatment, and we'll be able to get some funding for a documentary to follow this process.
Wow, that sounds really cool, man. That's that.
You know, and that's going to be great to see. You started out the interview with why I left Green Flower, and this is why, man. I wanted to make a bigger impact in the cannabis world than what we were doing there. Green Flower is great. They're providing education to a lot of people who need it, but there's cultural stories and issues that need to be told that involve this plant that will help make cannabis more worldly accepted. And I think these stories need to be told, and that's what inspired me to move on, was to get to stories like this and help the plant become the promise and the purpose that it's here for, and that's to help humanity. So if I can do that, I feel that me doing this work has been all worth it.
Yeah, I mean, not taking away anything from Green Flower, bro. That's a great platform for you to start from, but it's you had it's time to move on, bro.
Yeah, it
was time to.
It is, and I like it. And I even told him, I go, hey man, I'll bring you back some content if you want to put it on your platform.
Yeah.
But it's I owe a lot to them because I learned so much there, and I still have. Give a lot of credit to them and what they're doing in the industry. It's so important that people learn as much as they can. I think everybody who's in the cannabis industry knows how important education is. And, especially the people down in South America and, all Latin America, they know how important education is and how through education you further the movement and the acceptance of the plant. So it's needed everywhere. So every warrior out there who's willing to go out and educate and do for the good of the plant, you're needed, man. And individuals such as yourself with this podcast and everybody else like you, we're needed because the word has to go out. I even do things locally here in Oxnard, trying to further legalization and implement social equity programs here. Oxnard is about to legalize cannabis process, or at least some manufacturing, no dispensaries yet, but I want to make sure that here in Oxnard they follow the guidelines or the recommendations of the Minority Cannabis Business Association and implement a social equity program to address, the issues that have been plaguing the minorities since the prohibition of the plant. And what better opportunity to make an impact than in my own hometown, where we could lead with social equity so that everybody has a chance at working and profiting from this plant. And so it's not only happening on an international level for me, it's also happening here locally, and I'm really glad to be a part of it.
We all appreciate you out there, man. That you're out there. You're the man on the street. You're the man on all streets.
I try to be. So it's I'm looking forward to continued trips, and but even more, I'm looking forward to learning more of what I can do to help further the message. And so hopefully I'll have another story next time we come get together. I do have a few trips planned. I'm going to MJ BizCon next week in New Orleans. Hope to do some business out there, find some of those sponsors, hopefully, that will help me further those stories down in Colombia. We'll see, but it's always good to go to MJ BizCon and keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on. And I plan on going to Cannex in Jamaica in September.
Ooh, nice.
Also back to Medellin in November for Expo Medaweed. And also, what else? I've never been to Chile, but there's an Expo Medaweed going on in Chile in December.
Ooh, I've always wanted to go to Chile.
I really hope to get out to that one.
So, Rodney, where can we find all this content, brother? How do we find you, or what? Where do we get to you?
Right now I'm going to I'm putting together a source of a platform where you will be able to find this educational content. But for now, I would really like people to go to ganaciencia.com. Ganaciencia is the show we did down in Bogota. And there's just look and see what they're doing there, what Muisca's doing, what they're doing with some of the entrepreneurs down there.
Do me a favor.
One of the other shows is
send me a link. Send me a link and I'll put it in the show notes. I'll send you a link.
And Expo Cannabis, that's Julian Tovar's show down in Cartagena. And you'll see some good content there as well. But I'll keep you abreast of where you're going to be able to see this content. You're going to love it, man. We're working really hard to put together something that will really benefit the patient and professionals about cannabis, and we want it to be very well rounded so that there's something for everybody, and that most importantly that it's easy to understand, and that it all furthers the cause of the legalization and the everyday use of cannabis as a medical supplement.
Yeah, it's going to be cool to see that, because I was following you on your Instagram as you were down there. So, I want to see how you pull that all together.
Me on my Instagram, I'm Rodney Media, like Medina, but without the N, Rodney Media. And on Facebook, Rodney Medina. You can find me there, and you can see where I'm going, see what I'm doing, and see some of the people that I'm meeting with. And if you have any questions, you can instant message me there. And I'd be happy to pose any question to any expert that I run into, because it's about getting the questions answered for the people, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy being out there with the people, knowing what they want to know, so that I can hopefully bring it to them in an effective manner.
Right on, Rodney. Thanks a lot, brother. Thank you for getting on the phone with me again.
My pleasure, Alex, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Don't go anywhere. Don't hang up. Everybody else, I'll be back in just a moment. And I want to thank Rodney again for getting on the phone and talking to me about what's going on with cannabis in different parts of the world. And you can find him on Instagram at Rodney Media. Well, brothers and sisters, mis amigos, my friends, that's the end of my show today. If you want to leave a question or a comment about this episode, you can send an email to inmygrow@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram at inmygrow. Now, if this show has entertained you, educated you, or even given you a little escape from your day, go over to patreon.com/inmygrowshow and leave a financial donation. That money just helps me keep the show going. It helps me pay for equipment. It helps me pay for different hosting fees. Now, if you want to leave a donation, you can go over to inmygrow.com, click on the Support the Show tab, and you can buy a t-shirt. A different way you can help the show out financially is by clicking on the Amazon link in the show notes before you go shopping to Amazon, because that just lets them know that we sent you and the show gets a commission. Now, if you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it. But here's how you can help. Subscribe to the website, subscribe to the podcast, or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And then tell 3 other friends about the show. Really easy, really simple, real painless. Alright, everybody, I'm going to get on out of here because it is Father's Day, and I'm going to go try on some Father's Day ties. Don't forget, I love you all very much. And remember to always grow, learn, and teach.